Cleopatra, the name alone conjures up images of smoldering beauty, perhaps lounging seductively on a ship or whispering sweet nothings into the ear of a powerful Roman. But was she really like this? And did her famous love affairs play a greater role in her life than just romance? Hello everyone, I'm here. And today, let us unpack the enigma that is Cleopatra and see if we can find out what really made her tick. Born in 69 BC, Cleopatra was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, a line of Greek origin that had ruled over the Egyptian people since the death of Alexander the Great 3 centuries earlier. At the time of her birth, Egypt was still a part of the wider Hellenistic world, a world where Greek culture was dominant and where many of the centers of trade and learning were located in cities, such as Alexandria, which was Egypt's main city. Cleopatra would grow up speaking Greek as her first language and would be well versed in the classics of Greek poetry and philosophy. However, she would also have been aware of her Egyptian subjects and would have made an effort to learn their language and customs. After all, it was in their interests as the royal family to present themselves as the legitimate successors of the Egyptian pharaohs. When Cleopatra ascended to the throne, Egypt was a client state of Rome, meaning that while it had its own king and queen, it was ultimately answerable to the Roman Republic and its officials. This situation would become increasingly fraught as the century wore on and the Roman Republic became more militarized and ambitious. Eventually, Rome would come to control the entire Mediterranean and Cleopatra's Egypt would be but one of its many provinces. Still, Cleopatra would resist this outcome for as long as she could, thanks in no small part to her two famous love affairs. The first man in Cleopatra's life would be Julius Caesar, who arrived in Egypt in 48 BC. We don't know much about Cleopatra at this stage of her life, although Plutarch tells us that she was exceptionally attractive, but that her looks were only average when viewed against the backdrop of the other women in the royal court. According to Plutarch, when Caesar arrived, Cleopatra was keen to meet him. However, he was hesitant to see her, having just come off a bruising civil war against Pompey, whom Egypt had supported. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra managed to gain access to Caesar anyway, either by hiding in a carpet or by bringing him a basket of figs, depending on the version. Caesar would then be so taken by her intelligence and charm that he would forgive Egypt's past transgressions and restore it to its former status as a client kingdom. Furthermore, they would fall in love, a fact that would make Cleopatra very unpopular with her subjects, who saw Caesar as nothing more than an interloping barbarian. Their affair would produce a son named a child whom Caesar would never meet, as he would be assassinated less than a year after his visit to Alexandria. The assassination of Caesar, however, would prove to be a blessing in disguise for Cleopatra and her kingdom, as his adopted heir Octavian would now be engaged in a civil war with Mark Antony, Caesar's other adopted heir, a general and statesman who would play a critical role in the second great love affair of Cleopatra's life. Unlike Caesar, Antony would not arrive in Alexandria in a show of military force, but rather as part of a delegation sent by Caesar's assassins to ensure that Cleopatra would renounce her claim to Caesarian's inheritance. Antony would also be accompanied by his wife, Octavia, whom Caesar had intended for his heir apparent. As the story goes, however, Octavia would fail to seduce Antony away from Cleopatra, and so Antony would send her back to Rome and take Cleopatra as his lover and queen consort. This relationship would be both passionate and productive, as the couple would go on to have twins and would rule over Egypt, Syria, Asia Minor, and the eastern provinces, with Cleopatra taking on the title of Queen of Kings. However, the alliance between Antony and Cleopatra would cause outrage in Rome, where many considered them to be little more than a foreign threat looking to usurp the traditional order of the Roman Republic. Octavian seized on these anxieties, portraying Antony as a traitor and Cleopatra as a scheming seductress. To combat this propaganda, Cleopatra would parade herself around Rome in a golden chariot, while Antony was fighting his campaigns, solidifying her image as a glamorous yet dangerous foreigner. When Octavian came of age and took the title Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, he would declare war on Antony and Cleopatra, alleging that they had committed sacrilege by building a new capital city called Alexandria in the eastern province of Syria. In reality, though, Augustus wanted to punish Antony for marrying Cleopatra and for refusing to divorce her, as this was seen to violate Roman custom. With the war drums sounding, Cleopatra and Antony would flee to Egypt. There they would prepare to defend themselves against the might of the Roman army, an endeavor which would take years and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Cleopatra, however, was confident that she could beat Augustus, as she had done before with Caesar. She had amassed a large fleet of ships, which she believed would enable her to blockade the coast of Italy. If she could stop grain from reaching Rome, then Augustus's subjects would rise up and demand peace. But unfortunately for Cleopatra, her navy would be no match for that of Augustus. As the two sides would clash at the Battle of Actium in 32 BC, the battle itself was indecisive. But as Cleopatra fled, her flagship was damaged and she was forced to retreat to Alexandria. Now with the Roman fleet in control of the seas, it was only a matter of time until Augustus would lay siege to the city. Rather than fight her way out, Cleopatra would instead negotiate a settlement with Augustus. She would agree to forfeit her territories and to give up her claim to Caesarion. But in return, Augustus would spare her life and allow her to keep her fortune. After the humiliating loss, Cleopatra returned to her palace in Alexandria, where she lived out the remainder of her days. She would die mysteriously in 30 BC, perhaps through her own hand or perhaps by means of a venomous snakebite. Nonetheless, the legend of Cleopatra would live on, inspiring poets, playwrights, and painters for centuries to come. So what can we conclude about Cleopatra? What motivated her actions? And how did she balance the demands of her kingdom with her famous love affairs? Well, the answer is probably the same. Cleopatra, like most human beings, was motivated by her affair with Antony gave her a chance to expand it. She wasn't a heartless seductress or a power-hungry tyrant, but a smart and cunning leader who knew how to get what she wanted. Cleopatra's story has captured the popular imagination like few others in ancient history. There are numerous theories about her appearance, personality, and even ethnicity. Some scholars believe she may have been of pure Egyptian descent, while others argue she was Greek. Regardless, Cleopatra was a product of her time and place, a woman living in a man's world who used every tool at her disposal to achieve her goals. Whether those goals were personal or political doesn't really matter. What's important is that Cleopatra was a trailblazer, a woman who dared to defy the odds and make something of herself in a world that often seemed determined to keep her down. In Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra, the Egyptian queen famously declared, "Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety." While it remains a mystery exactly what Cleopatra looked like or how she died, there's one thing that's certain. Her story continues to fascinate us because of its timeless themes of love, loss, ambition, and betrayal. Cleopatra's legacy has been interpreted and reinterpreted throughout the ages. In recent times, she's emerged as a feminist icon, representing female empowerment and the challenges women face in a male-dominated world. From Hollywood blockbusters to indie films, Cleopatra's story continues to inspire artists and audiences alike. And that's why we're so fascinated by her, because in Cleopatra, we see a reflection of ourselves. In conclusion, Cleopatra's love affairs were not just about romance. They were about survival, power, and legacy. She chose her partners carefully, aligning herself with some of the most powerful men in the ancient world to ensure the safety and prosperity of her kingdom. While her story may have ended in tragedy, her memory lives on, reminding us that, even in a man's world, a woman can make a difference. So what can we learn from Cleopatra today? How can we apply the lessons of her life to our own? Perhaps it's the importance of knowing your worth and not settling for less than you deserve. Or maybe it's the need to be strategic and savvy in a world that often rewards those who are willing to play the game. Whatever the case may be, one thing is clear. Cleopatra was a woman ahead of her time, a true original who broke the mold and paved the way for generations of strong, independent women to come. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe so you'll be notified every time we release a new video. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up for more historical tales.